All right, folks. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to Azure Back to School. My name is Abdul Kazi. I'm based out of Toronto, and I have my co host, Christopher Gill.
Hey,
Chris,
everybody.
hey,
Welcome.
Chris, where are you located?
I'm located in Rochester, New York. Abdul, thanks.
Nice. That's awesome. We're just across the pond, if you will. So,
Right.
yeah, nice.
And it's a beautiful time of the year too. We can at least, try and swim across it and not like ice skate all the way from to each other. So.
Yeah, that could be an option in the wintertime. Absolutely. So, Chris, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Absolutely. So again, my name is Chris Gill. I'm a cloud and modern workplace advocate. My title at work is Director of Microsoft Applications. Kind of get to touch a little bit of everything, but in my somewhat spare time, I try to do stuff for the community, write things, blog about stuff. Just try to learn and share what I know, share what I learn. Try to help other people along with this journey. So, been in the industry for about 20 years. Most of my focus is around Azure and the hybrid cloud architecture.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. And one of the things
Sure.
that I would say about Chris, he's one of the humblest guys I've known. He knows his stuff very much, but
Thank you.
very humble. He's always willing to help, and he's involved in the community. So yeah, that's great with him.
Thank you.
And then quickly, I'll introduce myself before we get into the meat of the presentation. So my name is Abdul Kazi. I've been in the industry for 20 years now, doing Azure since 2014. I have an active blog and I'm very active in social media. So if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter, um, and happy to connect with you guys. So let's move on to our presentation. So the main topic today is Microsoft Zero Trust. So you might be hearing about zero trust quite a bit now because security is becoming such a vital shift. Not that it wasn't before, but now it has really become prominent because of the cloud, right? Everybody's moving to the cloud regardless of which cloud you use, public cloud, Azure, AWS, or GCP. Everybody's moving to the cloud, and we hear every single day there are things happening. So I don't know about you, but yesterday there were emails circling around Samsung got compromised. They sent an email saying, hey guys, we got compromised, so make sure you change your password. There have been other companies that have been reporting. So yeah, this is definitely a big issue now, and that's why security has become such a forefront focus, not only for CISOs, but in general, because the biggest issue with security is not only there's going to be repercussions on the systems, but it's a PR nightmare for the company. So anybody that gets compromised, that's get hacked, or we've heard a lot of things about ransomware, where actually public entities, government entities, they got ransomware and they had to pay a lot of money, and then that um, really breaks down the trust that people have with that company. So yeah, and that trust and building that trust is going to take a long time. There's no way, or there's no money you can invest to get that trust. It's just a matter of time, right? So I think that's why a lot of people are moving in that direction, making sure that zero trust is there. And then from a vendor aspect, yeah. So Microsoft, not only Microsoft, but the other larger vendors, they're all focused on zero trust now. Hence, Microsoft also is looking at the zero trust. And in a nutshell, what it does is it's providing really a control of making sure that all of the things are taken care of from a security aspect. Because when we talk about security, security is huge. If you ask a person what does security mean to you, you would get 10 different answers, right? Because depending on what line of work do they do, where they stand, if you ask a CISO, it's going to be different versus if you ask a developer what security means to them, right? So that's going to be very different answers. So uh, the challenge with security is it affects the entire IT landscape. It's not affecting just one workload or production environment or non-production environment, right? So it's the entire landscape. That's why security is paramount, and I think that's one of the challenges that people are facing now. We don't talk about security enough, but security should be a forefront of everything we do, regardless if we're doing production, if you're doing DevOps, if you're doing uh, development, what have you. So those are the main things we should be doing. Chris, anything
Right.
to add?
Oh, absolutely. I would just say, one of the things you mentioned about security, and you went through, some of the layers. I would even say, jokingly, to the end user, I think they sometimes associate pain with the idea of security, but the goal of the IT pro of our communities is to make sure that's seamless. So it's like, make sure that every endpoint that's being touched is being protected. It's a seamless approach. It's not as painful. It kind of meets somewhere in between where you're protecting the secrets of the business, the data, the whatever else, but also meeting the needs of the business for protecting end users, protecting credentials, protecting the device. So yeah, you mentioned vendors. I would definitely kind of point at the news we saw about LastPass too. Ransomware is one thing. Losing your business secrets, maybe blueprints for for your product, that's a whole different ball game. It's kind of an interesting time right now. So yeah, this is a timely talk for sure.
No, absolutely. And then talking about the zero trust digital estate. Wow, that's an interesting format there. I don't know what happened, but
Yeah, surprise. Hey, that's okay.
but
It's each topic plus one letter, so it's okay.
exactly right. So with security, as I mentioned, it is a large footprint. So this is where security comes into play. So security comes into identity. We talk about identity. That's where it comes in. Endpoint management. Your applications, how the applications are going to be interacting. For example, we have the web application firewall now for applications or other kind of securities to prevent that. You have infrastructure, you have network firewalls, you have other things to prevent that. Networking as well, and then data. Like data is exploding, so even security from a data aspect is huge now because of compliancy. When I'm working with my enterprise customers, first thing they ask, hey, how are you be storing data? Like, and they want data to be encrypted at rest, encrypted in motion. We have compliancy like SOC 2, PCI, HIPAA, FERPA, those kind of compliances. So data has to be top, like security has to be top of mind, right? So those are things. But this is such a vast topic. For today, what we are going to be mainly talking about is, a high level uh, infrastructure or a high level architecture, and then we'll probably get into the identity or device endpoint
Mhm.
discussion, because talking about like each of these topics can take its own session. So we'll try to focus our discussion today just for identity and devices. So, what does this look like from an architecture high end, right? When we talk about security, so this should really be a security posture for a company. Um, excuse me. So basically, you would have the security policy enforcements, and then um, the biggest challenge we've seen moving to the cloud is very different from on-prem, and what I mean by that is think about cloud is flat compared to on-prem. So when we have on-prem environment, on a larger environments like enterprise customers, you would have a team just dedicated for servers. So they're basically managing servers. The other team would be managing your and networking environment, your firewall switches, routers, what have you, and they're very isolated. The other team would be managing your storage, your SANs. Uh, it's very different in the cloud. Cloud, when you're coming in, you're pretty much getting exposed to everything. Why? Because when you are setting up a new resource, you would have to basically set up resource groups. So you would have to set up VNets. You would have to set up storage, right? Azure Bobs and whatnot. So that's why I said cloud is very flat. That's why you have to start thinking, how does my policy come into play, and how's the policy going to affect all of these objects or endpoints, if you will. So um, what people don't realize is you need to have security um, and policies coming into cloud. You need to have that in place. And Chris, you come from the legal world, so any tidbits from there?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree, and it's an interesting thing for sure. We're still on our cloud transformation, right? From a legal perspective, as a lot of other law firms. I'll be honest, we're usually behind the scenes, or a little bit lagging than everybody else. The nice part about that is we get to see what everybody else does first, and we kind of take some of the good, best practices and kind of learn from that. But yeah, from a cutting your teeth and getting into this, the one thing that I definitely want folks to at least like kind of bring home and really ring true is part of this process too is kind of unifying that experience a little bit. So whether it's the identity, the device management, infrastructure, apps, a lot of these things are starting to converge where or already are converging where excuse me, I can go into one central spot and manage that identity, whether it's in the cloud, hybrid, on premises. I've got features and functionality that scale all the way back to those devices that may still be, running in our data centers, in a satellite, location, small office or something like that. So it's pretty wild. It's pretty wonderful to see. But you're right. It's a different ball game, and um, you've got to be a security minded first approach with this entire process. The zero trust, I always say it's like trust nothing. It really comes down to trust nothing and validate every step of the way. Do I really trust your device is healthy? Do I really trust your identity is, who you say you are, that you've, maybe stepped up once for a multi-factor or, provided something else. But same thing we're doing, for our business. You get into device, you're giving some either biometric or some other, step up authentication to get into it. It's not just a username or passwords. Um, I will try not to say that passwords are bad. I personally don't like them. I think the community is working towards getting the password list, but we'll get there maybe at some point in time. But from that perspective, you know, data is the biggest thing that we really need to worry about. It comes down to not only our internal business, the client information that we're getting to. So quite paramount. Everything is encrypted in transit, encrypted, while sitting, backups, you name it, soup to nuts. It's all, secure in that regard. So,
No, makes sense. Absolutely. And then moving into the enabling technologies, right? So Microsoft actually has a product line for each of those technologies. So when we talk about identities, you have the Azure Active Directory, which is phenomenal. You and one of the things I still see people confusing between Azure Active Directory and the Microsoft directory services. Uh, is Active Directory is just identity management. It's not a full blown domain controller where you would do policies, group policies, other things. So keep that in mind. It's only you, and hence it's under identity because it's still doing identity right now. Um, the other one is Microsoft Defender for endpoint. So you can do device management, and then Microsoft Endpoint Manager. That's actually managing it.
yeah. And I would say from an endpoint manager perspective, just to give a little bit, that's near and dear to my heart. So the team that I manage, we've got configuration manager on premises. We have co-managed devices. We're using Intune. From any perspective, you basically have the opportunity to either switch out, stop using group policies, or continue to use group policies, but also apply cloud, policy. different compliance policies, maybe configuration settings from the cloud now. One of the awesome benefits, I love group policy. I made boku bucks managing group policy all these years, for the past 20 years or so. But let's be honest, there's no great way of kind of reporting that compliance back. Some of the things that we now see in these, modern, I'd say like a managed device environment, so MDM, MAM, I now have those compliance policies that are reporting and telling me that they're healthy or they're not healthy, that they're verified or not verified on an individual device basis or even down to the user basis. Those signals can be used as part of the zero trust enabling technology to, affect different things throughout the structure. If I'm coming in and I haven't applied a security update for 2 months and there's a, severe vulnerability, maybe a CVE score of 9.7, that's something pretty severe. I might not want to allow that in my environment. So this gives you that opportunity to kind of protect your environment, make sure that the end user or the device is doing what it should be, and really just addressing the risks.
No, that's great. Thanks, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, right, you have data. So Microsoft Information Protection, the apps, Microsoft Cloud App Security, which includes your WAF, Web Application Firewall. Then you have the Azure Security from the infrastructure. And then networking is becoming huge now. So Azure networking, um, when Azure really started, Microsoft did not have a great firewall. They had the Azure Firewall standard, but now they have the premium one, which is kind of competing with the independent players. Obviously, it's not going to be a full blown comparison to your Palo Altos and whatnot. I still see enterprise customers bringing their own NVA firewalls, which is fine because there's no way Microsoft can compete with that or have all those features. And plus, depending on what you're doing, and truth be told, not everybody is going to be 100% in the cloud. Majority of the companies are going to be hybrid. So why not bring what you have on-prem into Azure and make it easier? Because one of the biggest challenge with cloud is learning curve. Things are moving so fast, you have to learn. So if you can actually reuse what you have, then why not?
Right. And I just circle back. One of the big things. You're right, Abdul. It's not just a, yeah. We'd love to stand here and say, Microsoft, everything Microsoft, and it doesn't have to be that way. The beauty with this design, though, is especially for the network components and some of the others, the third party, those signals, those things can be sent right into the center here, where we're talking, like Microsoft Sentinel, that component for security teams, the SOC operations. That's for most folks a one-stop shop where they can really buy into creating workbooks, creating those reusable playbooks, addressing the needs of those security signals anywhere across this design and architecture.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah, exactly. So now let's take a look at how do we, talking about identity, how do we secure the identity from that aspect? So you have the Active Directory, which is your on-prem Active Directory at the bottom. Then you have on the top, you have the Azure AD. And the beauty of this is it's becoming single sign-on now, right? So and think about it. And the perfect example I can give is, Shadow IT, where a couple of years ago when cloud was really new, a lot of IT from a security aspect, they're like, oh, you cannot do this. We don't know if it's secure or not. People started using third-party services. So, for example, uh, people were not giving email access without a VPN. So what they would do is email a document to the personal email, go work on that, and then come back.
Ooh.
So IT by itself was creating a hurdle for them. So bear in mind, don't be that stringent that users have to circumvent your own IT procedures for that. But from a single sign aspect, what happens is now we have on in a large organization, we have uh, handful of applications that we're using. So think about from an IT and security aspect. If a employee leaves, then if you are not using single sign-on, the person who was in charge, could be HR, could be IT person, of disabling the access. They would have to individually go into each application, shut it down, archive. That's a lot of work. If you have single sign-on, boom, as they say, one throat to choke. Basically, disable the account in AD, and boom, you're done, regardless of how many applications they had access to.
Right. And I like I like where you're going with this too, because the one thing that rang in my head was provisioning. A lot of this approach too has provisioning the systems or deprovisioning. So take Smartsheet for instance. They have a very defined what they call skim provisioning approach through this. So from the time you birth an account, wherever it may be on premises, in the cloud, that will synchronize. It'll turn it up. It's live as long as the user's in your environment, and then it potentially goes away as the employee leaves. There are some nooks and crannies. I know some systems we have where maybe it's in a company alumni. There's got to be a little bit of a design approach, and how that's handled. We've all been there. It's I think we've all got the t-shirts for it, so it's fun. We're still kind of working through that, I think, as a community to address it. But yeah, I really like the simplicity now, and especially with, I'll be honest, even some of the work that I'm still going through with migrating things from, Active Directory Federation services. We still have ADFS for some things. So the ability now for just seeing how some of those workloads are going, getting some insights from some of the tools that Microsoft's providing, and allowing you to simply cut over to a new approach, a new multi-factor authentication approach, or SSO approach, or even seamless SSO, has been pretty awesome and a good experience so far.
That's a good point you raised about ADFS, right? So, um, because one of the biggest challenges we've seen is the cost too, right? It's not about setting up the technology; it was the cost, because for ADFS you need to have two minimum servers there, and then you would have the web proxy set up. So even just setting that up, and think about it, if you were setting those VMs in the cloud, that became expensive right away. So
And you have to manage certificates too. So let's be honest. I'm finding there are few and far between folks that really understand how certificates, what they are, how they manage, how they get renewed. So that's been fun too. But I might be speaking from experience there, but but it's a trainable thing. It really it's been but again it's something that can kind of, I wouldn't say get in the way, but it's a little bit easier. There's ways that you can kind of monitor and manage those things better in the cloud than you can on premises environments. So
yeah, and absolutely, and Azure AD is kind of making it easier because you have the single sign-on now. You can do AD, can do federation services. A lot of companies are being federated now,
yeah.
so it's really moving in the right direction. And with Azure AD, there are a lot of features, and we'll talk about those when we get into the demo.
Yeah. And I think even I'll just mention too, one of the other things I saw recently was some authentication with AWS as well, native. So SSO app directly with AWS. So things are changing, that's for sure.
Yeah. One thing I would say, I would give to and to your point, give to Microsoft, because I work with AWS as well. And Microsoft does a phenomenal job on identity services. And even there is integration. So you can do Azure AD SSO with AWS to sign on, because, yeah, AWS doesn't really has a account for identity there. So, yeah, kudos to Microsoft on that front. Okay, so moving right along, let's talk about MFA. And I cannot emphasize this. A lot of people still do not like MFA, which kind of surprises me, because think about from your personal aspect, right? So we have a lot of accounts on a personal level. You might have a bank account, and then on a bank account, you really should have MFA, because people are like, oh, I have a different password, I'm not changing it. But if your computer gets compromised, if somebody installs a keylogger on, they're getting your keystrokes and everything. So what's going to happen there? I travel sometimes to Asia, and then when I'm logging from there, I always get asked, okay, you haven't logged in here before, do MFA. It forces me to do MFA. So
Right.
it's starting to push security, which is good because it's also protecting you, right? So think about it. If your account got compromised, if somebody took money out of your account, that's going to be a hassle calling your bank and, hey, my account was compromised. Now I'm missing my funds, or my credit card was compromised. Now, cancel all those credit cards. That's really a challenge. So businesses really have to think from this aspect. I see a lot of customers, they're like, yeah, we're not seeing a value for all of our users. Yeah, sure, we'll enable MFA for our global admins or people with high privilege, but the low hanging users, no. But to me, you have to get into that mode, because as Chris said, security is paramount. Start from the bottom, and then always be on the guard. So, from the Active Directory standpoint, Microsoft does a great job and provides multiple ways that you can do it. I love the Microsoft Authentication app. Um, we also use the Google Authentication app,
Mhm.
but I prefer the Microsoft Authentication because to me it's much more uh, compelling or easier to use. So I use that. A lot of companies are using Windows Hello now, right? Like for authentication. So that's a perfect uh, MFA. And then you can do FIDO2 keys, which Chris can talk because he has way more experience than me on FIDO2 keys. And then just to give you a sense, what FIDO2 key means is it's basically another physical device. So back in the day, we used to have RSA tokens. So you would have a like a device. It would basically have different numbers. So this is exactly what the FIDO key does. You have something else, you plug it into your laptop or desktop or what have you, and then it becomes another form of authentication. And biometrics, right? Like biometrics has become very common on your cell phone. So your Android devices, your iOS devices, you can do biometrics. So that's pretty common. And then from a push aspect, you can get push notifications, you can get soft tokens, you have hard tokens and SMS. I'm not a big fan of SMS, to be honest, because SMS are easy to get compromised. So I tend to stay away from SMS. What I would say, do a push, because push is easier for the user, especially when you're authenticating, you get push notification, you say yes or no, right? So that's
Right.
much easier. Um, or you can just use the authentication app. Chris, I'll let you add.
Yeah, it may not. This may be a mistake if you're going to let me add stuff to this, but but that's okay. We'll walk through it. I'll keep it brief. SMS voice, as far as I'm concerned, that's a non-starter for the most part. We've seen, a couple compromises even with the voice stuff. Let's be honest. If it's a phone call that is coming to you and it's coming at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, guess what? You're probably going to answer and say yes or give the one and just move on. We're all sleeping, we're tired, or whatever else. Just kind of, I would say, a little bit more lax. So that's a real thing. You definitely don't want to go there, at least in my humble opinion. The FIDO keys are interesting. I know Abdul set me up. I'll just dangle. I've got a few of them here. I've been testing a bunch of different stuff. Anything from Yubico to Fashion to different components. The nice part about that is that as you mentioned, Abdul, the yes or no. I think a lot of people think of MFA and think back to, oh my God, I had an RSA card and it had 6 digits on it. And every time I had to get in, I have to type those 6 digits. What a pain. And even if I can copy it and move it from that app that's on my phone now as a soft token, copy it and move it. Well, guess what, folks? if you're using some of the newer browsers, maybe you're using Chrome or whatever else on your device, or Edge on your device, and you're synchronizing stuff. As soon as you copy that passcode, it's going somewhere else too. Yeah, it's only temporary, but there's a little bit of danger there too. Setting up the FIDO keys, there's a little bit on the IT side. There's a little bit of provisioning, purchasing and whatnot, but at the end of the day, you're handing something to your end user, almost like the hello approach, where they're putting in a passcode for that security key. They're validating that security key can be used on maybe this device and this device, but not that one. And it can be used for this service and that service, but maybe not another service. So it's kind of neat. Some of these, like I said, some of the ones I have in front of me, they kind of have two sides to them. So, it'll fit on your iPhone, it'll fit on your Android. It's nice from that perspective, and it's biometric too. So when you plug it in, it's going to ask you, press it. It'll validate your fingerprint, and then it also validates that credential or verifiable credential as well. So I'll end there. A lot of cool features. I could talk for days. That might be another session coming up. So thank you.
And then from a policy aspect, right, user and sign-on risk. So these are the different things you can do. And some of things are going to be enforceable and right off the gate. Some of things might not be. So, one of the things I've seen is, I'll talk about quickly from a conditional access, and which kind of already mentioned, is when you are going to a different location. So let's talk about geolocation, right? So if you haven't logged in from a different location before, it's going to ask you for MFA, or it's going to ask you to authenticate and prove, hey, you're the person you're saying you are. So those are things you can start enforcing to have better security. So allow block access. So everything should be blocked unless you prove otherwise, that you are the or you have access to um, make sure that you can access these documents, or resources and whatnot. And then from a forced password reset, that's I don't agree on that one. Like, a lot of companies are still forcing passwords for 45 days policies or 90 days policies. Uh, the challenge, what I've seen, is people are still writing passwords on their sticky notes. That defeats the purpose. So let's not enforce passwords resets. Maybe do once a quarter or twice a quarter, and then go from there. I know that Chris is right.
I know. I'm trying to reel in. I would say in one, maybe one or a few conditions, and I look at the heart of this, where you talk about the user and the sign-in risk. A lot of these things are being evaluated now as like a low, medium, high type of sign-in risk, and that high, it can be adjusted. It can be adjusted for your business, but I'm targeting the high for sure, because I would say only in a certain situation where I've seen that you hit it right on the nose, the geolocation thing. Maybe I signed in Toronto, and then I saw somebody sign in Hong Kong within a minute or two. That is impossible travel. There is no way, unless you have a DeLorean. I know there's a new one coming out soon, but unless you're getting in that car and you can make it there in a minute, it's not happening. Me personally, I would kind of say maybe that's a condition where I want to target and say, if I see this, ask the user to multi-factor, maybe once or twice, show me two proofs, and then maybe suggest a password reset at that point. But I agree. I wouldn't go out there and say, man, we really should be resetting passwords, but certain conditions, I would. So
Yeah, and a lot of people are still using on-prem, right? So the good thing with Active Directory is you can enable an MFA for your on-prem applications and environment as well. So let's say if you have a highly critical application line of business,
mhm.
and you want MFA, by all means enable MFA on that as well, right? And there are going to be exceptions. So what we've seen is, you can always white label your network. So what happens is, when MFA start enabling, IT did not think it's some of the organizations didn't think it through, and then they're like, yeah, MFA is going to be enabled all over regardless. So people walked into their office and they had to do MFA, which defeats the purpose because technically your network is supposed to be secure. So those are the things you start learning as you go along. But yeah, one of the major suggestions is whitelist your network so people don't get annoyed by MFA, because that's going to change on a daily basis. Meaning, whenever you come in, uh, you'll have to authenticate because your session expired. So it's basically trying to validate. But if it's on your network, yeah, no MFA required. Or there are going to be exceptions where you say, yeah, no MFA is required. So those are going to be case to case basis. But in general, I think that's a very prevalent today.
Great point.
And then on the access decision, so we kind of talked about this. So to me, everything should be denied, to Chris's point, to begin with, and then you should enforce conditional access, meaning we're granting you access based on this condition. So, and one of the things I've seen is, let's even talk about from a when you're managing a Azure environment. A lot of people managing their VMs, they're like, oh, we just opened up RDP port through 3389. To me, it's a big no-no. I'm like, wow, you're exposing yourself, right? So for that, you should really be using just in time, and which is a different topic and different session completely. But so those are things you could do, and that actually comes under conditional access, because
Right.
what you're doing is you're giving a person access for X amount of time, and then after that, it goes away, right? So those
Right.
are things you need to start implementing, and then PIM, uh, that actually is also condition, like somewhat conditional access, where you're saying, okay, you have to start looking at what are the criteria that you would get access to.
And I know I wouldn't feel right if I didn't say it, but one of the things that come to mind too, we're talking devices here from, it could be a workstation, it could be a laptop, it could be a mobile device. We're also talking the server workloads too, and one of the other things, as you said, I think we might have brainstormed like 3 different sessions here today, but Azure Bash is another one. Great technology where that RDP that goes away. It's an HTML5 browser. It's a completely different approach. You have everything monitored and audited. It's actually a little bit smoother than even RDP, to be honest with you. But yeah, that kind of gets away from some of that, because now you're in an encrypted tunnel over 443, HTML5 app within the browser. It's pretty slick. So it's comes with a cost. I'm not gonna lie. It's not cheap, but for folks that need to have that level of security, it's a pretty neat tool. So,
Actually, you kind of hit right on it. It comes with a cost. One of the biggest challenge I've seen with security, people like, yeah, what's my ROI for security? It's hard to, get ROI out of security. So think from your personal aspect, you might be installing security cameras in your home. There's no ROI upfront. What you're trying to do is prevent, somebody to break in, or if there's a break in, you have proof who broke in, those kind of things. So same thing with security. There's no really an ROI right up front, but you're investing in the proper guardrails to secure your environment, so no authorized user or person would even come in.
good point.
And then lastly, enforcing least privilege access with strong governance. So one of the things I cannot emphasize enough is governance. So I've done a lot of Azure landing zone, talks, and one of the things I've seen is people don't give enough weightage to governance, because the challenge with governance is, it's not tangible. Meaning, when we're planning to go into the cloud, okay, you have a plan, so you see the plan right there. With governance, it becomes mushy, because sometimes management has to get involved, and it's a lot of talking and people getting together. But you need to have governance right off the bat, because if you do not have the proper governance, then things are going to be, hard to implement, because you might have implemented things and then now it's against the governance, and then you have to go change things. So that's not only going to take more time but more effort, and that's going to be a problem. So governance should be identity lifecycle. So from a person coming into organization, going out, have a process, how that looks like. Always provide least privilege access, regardless who the user is. They should not get any more access than they need. This is what we've done on Active Directory or on-prem environment, right? We don't start giving everybody domain admin privileges. So yeah, don't start giving. And this is other thing I would also mention is, what I've noticed is people start right up the bat start giving owner access. I'm like, owner contributor are a big no-no for me. Reader access, absolutely, because you would give. So when I'm doing working with companies, they would provide us reader access because we have to take a look at the environment. But one of the good things now is Microsoft has special roles. Rather than assigning those privilege, you can do custom roles. The only caveat is you need licensing for that, but I would say assign custom roles. Those are amazing, and it's going to be easier to manage. And then audit, right? Audit your environment on a quarterly, or depending on how often you can do it. I cannot emphasize enough. I've seen people do not audit because people leave the organization, no audit was done, the accounts did not get turned on, they still have access, or they were a part of a highly privileged user group and they still have access, and they've left, and it's been 6 months now.
Or they're an owner on a resource, and then and then bad things happen, especially if it's like Key Vault or something like that. So yeah, I would stress, and I know maybe I'll show my age a little bit on this one, but I like to bring up this isn't the Ronco set it and forget it approach. You did like the old TV, whatever 30-second interview or advertisements on, here's this thing, and you can just do it once and never have to touch it again. This is not that. This is you do it once, but you are continually monitoring and maintaining that. However it is that you can automate that, that's the route you want to go. But you're absolutely right, Abdul. You hit it on the nose. It's like you want to meet the needs, but also peel that back when you're finished, making sure that you have full end-to-end view into what's going on, any of the auditing, any of the changes that are being made, for compliance purposes. It's not just for us so that we can see it, right? IT folks, we don't really, at that point, it's like, I don't want to say we don't care, but from that perspective, it's like we're trying to do and abide what the business needs. So yeah, it's been awesome. So Abdul, what do you think? A couple demos on some stuff here?
Yeah, why not, right? Let's do
All right.
quick demo.
So hopefully the demo gods will be with us today. I'm going to bring up a screen and touch on a few things. So I'll set the stage for, one of the things we kind of want to talk about is just some of the new MFA approaches. Also talk a little bit on the conditional access, a couple things that, we can show, things you can look out for, approaches that you can use in your environments, even if you're just getting started. And then we're going to look at PIM a little bit too, and just, get some familiarity there. So with that said, so I have a dev environment, my own tenant that I was kind of, just set up for this demo. Things that we have available, we talked about FIDO2 security key. You see that's enabled in this environment. If I were to go into these settings, I can show from a perspective of configuration what type of, I'll unmask this for a second, what type of AA GUIDs are being used. So for me, I'm restricting by certain keys. So I've got keys that I've purchased or whatever else. There's a whole list that's available. Microsoft provides, community provides. but you can come in here and just add or remove certain ones and say, these are the only ones I'm using in my environment. I don't trust anything else. I can set up restriction policies and attestation on those. But from a basic perspective, that gets you going for just getting your users, registered and whatnot for FIDO. From a perspective of Microsoft Authenticator, again, I would agree, Abdul, one of my favorites. I've got this set up, and we're like 45 minutes through this, and we haven't used the word strong authentication. So maybe we get bonus points for that one. But strong authentication, we hear that a lot. What does that really mean? Well, for the most part, it comes down to using multi-factor. So multi-factor authentication, strong authentication, those are becoming pseudonyms, kind of synonymous with each other. But, if it's verified credential, if it's a FIDO key, if it's an MFA token, whatever else, I'm considering that strong authentication. So from that perspective, my tenant, I have these MFA settings pretty much turned on for everybody. I haven't, excluded any groups. Inside a configuration, this is a little new. So I just wanted to, kind of point out and say, here's some features and functionality that we now have available to us. Some of these are on by default, some are off, but number matching. So when this push notification comes out, as we said before, maybe a yes or no, but maybe I don't really want just a yes or no because, as we said, hey, SMS or a phone call in the middle of the night, I'm probably just going to press that yes button. I might just, sneak past it or whatever. So maybe depending on the signal, the environment that's being requested for access, I want this to kind of ask you to type in something. So we'll show this in a minute. Application name is really nice too. So anything that you're building, any third-party providers that are building applications, any of the Azure managed applications, that information can pop up directly in your MFA signal as well on your device. And then this geographic location. So yeah, we're going big or going home, but we're going to show all three of these kind of pop up on a screen here in a minute. The geolocation, yeah, you guessed it, it's using GPS on your device. There is still some best guess, but it should be, if GPS is up and running, it's an Intune managed device, that GPS is a signal that's going back to say where it's located, or if I can find it and wipe it if I need, or whatever else, that's going to be turned on. So from a perspective of MFA, that can also be helpful to say, well, someone did try to sign in. Maybe this was an unexpected location. It's not where you're at right now, because I know where I'm at right now. I'm in Penfield or Rochester, New York. So I'll see that on this notification. So let's walk through that very experience. And again, with the help of our demo gods, I'm going to briefly show my phone, and I'm going to sign in as this Chris at cfgcloud.io guy, which I know near and dear, and I think you all know very near and dear to your hearts as well. And we see that the approval is asking for the code 81. Now, what you're going to see on the phone is the app name, as we discussed. So app is Azure Portal. And know that right now, it's a pretty good guess. It's not 100%, but I'm probably over here on the map. So yeah, that's pretty close. I trust it. I'm going to type in 81. And that's our number matching part. So again, from top to bottom, the app notification, basically that app name, the GPS location, and then that number matching. And I'm going to select done. I also need face or fingerprint to get through that. And I'm in. And quite convenient, we're going to Entra. So just a brief note on Microsoft's recent changes. One of the things that the Microsoft has tried to do was take Azure AD and squish it a little bit more to make it more understandable to folks, make it a little bit more simplistic to manage. So some of the things that we were talking about, where previously I was showing the portal of, hey, we're configuring, I'll just blow this up a little bit more, but For configuring security settings, well, you guessed it. I would be under protect and secure, and then I could come in and say multi-factor authentication or identity protection or conditional access, and here's where I would manage all that stuff. So for those that are managing the Microsoft 365 in their environments, like M365 admin, admin.microsoft.com, this is very familiar, very similar feel to it. Of course, kudos, black mode, dark mode. I love it. That's wonderful. So at least on my eyes, not everybody loves it, but I digress. So, all right, demo 1 completed. Thank you, demo gods. We're going to minimize this, and we're going to move on to the second one. So, Abdul, any thoughts on that? Any feedback? Anything that you wanted to provide before I move on to the next?
No, I think that was great. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, so moving on to conditional access. For those, even if you're new, honestly, Microsoft at one point in time, about a year or two ago, I believe, had set up what's called security defaults. So if you set up a new tenant, new environment, security defaults are on by default. So there's four, maybe 5 main rules that are set up that protect and enforce MFA, that do some other tricks and stuff. But again, as the shirt says, don't accept the defaults. So, for your environment, your mileage may vary. You may want to configure different components, different requirements based on your business needs. So at one point in time, I came in here and said, I want MFA for administrators. I want to start blocking legacy authentication. I may be looking at, sorry folks, I'm looking at Cisco Duo for, MFA to toy and learn and just get, some stuff set up for maybe other organizations. But, I could come in here and create new policies. But one of the awesome things that's been recently done as well is this new policy from template. So I'll just focus on that for a minute. If I come into this,
there, right? So to your point on Duo, working with enterprise customers, because they have so many different systems and different vendors, they would be integrating it. So I've even seen companies have MFA for AD, Azure AD, and then have other MFAs as well. So don't be surprised.
Right, and I'll just say this too. It's a really good point. So for some businesses, I definitely see a need. Wink, wink. I definitely see a need where we can have maybe guest users that are coming into your SharePoint environment or some part of your environment. And they could be using one multi-factor approach, maybe Azure MFA or whatever, because we have so many guest authentications with that. And then for the business, we're using something else, Duo or whatever else. So you can use those signals, those controls from a conditional access policy to say, I want MFA this way for these people, kind of like the 31 flavors and then some type approach. But I want this flavor for these users, and then I want a different flavor for the business users. So good point. Thank you, Abdul. All right. So new policy from template. And again, we have our choice of either identities. So we want to focus on the identity side of it. The user, maybe the managed service identity, what have you, or devices. So I'll start with identities just to give quick insights. But boom, as soon as I click that, I have a choice of about 9 or 10 different policies here. And I see these probably growing, changing over time as well. But I could either click on it to view, or I could just say, yeah, I want to run with this. Now, again, on the don't accept the defaults, each one of these does have a different default name. Highly recommend to just select one of these, whatever you're comfortable with, click the next, and just toy with it. It's going to get set up in your environment as report only, and I'm going to sneak back to what I have on my screen here. It's going to get set up just like this one. So this report only, it's kind of watching, it's kind of providing some insights. We can use the what if controls. We can hop through, we can even go into it, take a look at any of the settings, see who's included and excluded from that perspective. Oh, this guy, something's wacky going on here, but yeah, he's probably an owner or something like that, tenant admin, who knows. I know, but type of apps that are protected, maybe different conditions, and then controls that are being selected. So here, I'm requiring multi-factor authentication for all users. So again, I'm requiring that multi-factor for everyone. And I'm going to call something out and say this is interesting, because I would say require all the selected controls here, but maybe that's just me. As a default, I would probably change that and just say require all. But again, when I'm done with making these changes, from my recommendation, if your business has a naming scheme or whatever else, like I do, I would have CFG Cloud and just indicating that I made a change to this policy and maybe I want to turn this on, and then I click save. But that gets me to the point where I know that I've taken this from a template, but I've also made some changes for it in my environment. So just a quick and easy approach from my perspective, to kind of get going on a bunch of this stuff.
Is there a way to
Um,
make a copy, or like I know a lot of policies you can make a copy or duplicate, right? So I guess it doesn't give that, but that would be interesting if Microsoft starts doing that, because a lot of sometimes what you want to do is have multiple policies because one policy doesn't apply to all, right? So there might be a specific user group that you want to not enforce, because going back to your previous screen where you had all the checklist, it says, okay, password required or change password required, right? So if you don't want somebody to change password required, you want to give them a different policy. I think that would be ideal for Microsoft to say, yeah, merge, or not merge, but make a copy of this, tweak the policy, and then apply. Like
right.
in group policy, right? Like we create that policy and we kind of tweak it, and then we apply it to uh, that OU or object or whatnot.
Joel, I might know somebody who can take that feedback for you and see if we can get some change in the environment. I think that's a fantastic idea. I'll say this, when the session's released, I'll follow up, because there's another gentleman, good friend of mine, who's gone through a different approach. So yes, this is very UI. Let's be honest. There's folks that still prefer the UI. There's folks that want to go, DevOps approach, cloud approach. Both can be done. So, this isn't the only method for sure. A lot of these policies can be done by code. So, from a JSON file perspective, or, if it's an ARM template, bicep template, whatever you're using, that can be done. I'm going to call out one of the things that he had done. He actually put together his whole DevOps approach to deploy these as code. So it's an approval process. There's a full check and check out, and then they get deployed. So I will dig that up and share with everybody, because it's just mind blowing the work he's done there. But it would be nice to see that as something that, I'll be honest, I was a code guy, but if I could just kind of click and get it done and not have to go through all the setup, that would be fantastic. So
Yeah, but to your point, right? Everybody's moving in the DevOps world, so and ideally, you really should be implementing things through ISC, infrastructure as code,
yeah,
biceps, ARM templates, or if you're multi-cloud, Terraform. There are other tools now as well. So yeah.
right, right. Okay, good dialogue. Anything else you think I should cover here, Abdul, on conditional access?
No,
Any other thoughts?
I think we're good on this one.
All right. And last, but certainly not least, we'll touch on privileged identity management just a bit. So on the tab, I just kind of jumped ahead, just in the efforts of time. But one of the things that you can do once you get into this environment, again, we talked about licensing, so this might not be for everybody. It does require Azure AD P2 for licensing. There may be some other restrictions there too, but again, this, once you have that P2, I'll be honest, that kind of kicks in almost by default nowadays. So once you've changed from a P1 licensing to that P2, you will see some differences in your environment. What I'm trying to get to from this perspective, which I think would be valuable for everyone seeing this, is how we really go and say, all right, I have a role. So, Joel and I kind of talked about custom roles. those can show here too. These are just the Azure built-in roles that I've been kind of working through. But I can come into this and say from maybe a Intune administrator role, I have an eligible assignment, and something that's new that has changed recently too is I could give this type of assignment to an individual or a group. So the group is really, really nice now because I can go in and I can actually design this as intended from the get-go and then slide in users based on maybe my business automation rules or whatever else. So I still have that auditing, but I don't have to come back into privileged identity management and keep making adjustments and changes to this. I can just set it. I know I don't want to say Ronco, but I can set it kind of in sudo, just have it managed. I'm not going to forget it, but I will kind of look at this from that perspective and say, I can see the auditing and whatever else. From the role settings, I could see, how long this activation really works for this user, maybe justification. So I'm going to get a field that says, hey, why am I doing this? Why do I need this? What do I need to do? What changes do I need to make? There may be ticket information based on a Jira or, some internal ticketing system, service desk, ServiceNow, whatever you may be using. Obviously, this is the big one. Activation highly required. Any of the administrators, if it's got the word administrator in it, make sure you're turning on the MFA activation for that. Please, please, please. Require approval. Maybe you don't want this for everything. I would say for an administrator, you want to turn that to on. So that gives a nice little workflow. You can kind of define who the approvers are. And I can just hop through that real quick. So from that perspective, maybe I wanted to change this to, I don't want these folks in here for, 8 hours. 8 hours can do a lot of damage. 15 minutes can do a lot of damage. So I'm going to say 2 hours. I'm going to say require approval. I'm going to go through and maybe just pick one of these guys, this dude here, and I can update the assignment from that perspective. So very quickly, I can just add an approver or a list of approvers, or maybe even a full M365 group, which, again, is a distribution list in that regard. It could go out to a bunch of folks. So from that perspective, I'm going to say update. We'll save it. But again, coming into, then is that user coming into the environment, I have the ability to go into privileged identity management and then opt into those roles. So I have a list of, if I were to go into my roles as that user, I would have a list of things that are available to me as eligible assignments that I could opt in and say I want to potentially, let me see if I can switch user here. One moment, we will MFA up, and then I will just demo this part of it too live. $47. Excellent. So here we go. So from that perspective, now I have an eligibility for maybe an Intune administrator or a global reader or conditional access administrator. I can go and say, I want to activate this. Any one of these. So we'll pick global reader. This one's set for 3 hours. I need to reason, demo purposes, and Abdul said so. And we click activate. That seems like a pretty good reason. I mean, Abdul's my boss. I don't know about that. But from that perspective, then whoever set up as the approval process, that kind of fires all these other triggers happen behind the scenes. If it's something that just automatically activates, I could come back in here and say, oh, I'm assigned, or whatever else. So I can see that active assignment is running. These are permanent. Again, folks, we kind of want to get away from these if we can. There are some reasons to have this in your environment. I understand, but from a perspective of that just in time, just enough administration, you kind of want to get away from this as best you can and just make them eligible so that folks can come in, maybe your DevOps team, your infrastructure folks, or even your other administrators. Keep the break glass account for one global administrator, put a FIDO key, whatever else, lock it up, put it somewhere in a data center or somewhere in some lockbox or whatever it is. But from that perspective, you kind of want to get to this approach for that privileged identity management. I'll say this from the other perspective, the expired assignments too, full end to end, you're going to see that, as it gets stood up, the user uses it for a certain amount of time and then is done with it. They can come back in on this active assignment and say, I want to deactivate it. They were done in 15 minutes. They can deactivate their own. There's emails that are flowing to the administrators. They get hey, this person activated it. This person deactivated. This is how much time it is. You want to go see details, go take a look at the audit log. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Abdul, any other thoughts on PIM?
No, this is great, actually. Yeah, this was amazing. Thanks for the demo.
Yeah. I am happy that demo gods and goddesses were with us. So, it's hopefully no one probably even realizes, but I had wonderful internet issues this entire week. So I'm happy that we got it recorded. Hopefully you all enjoyed our session. Abdul, any other closing statements that you have?
I really enjoyed this session, to be honest, because really loved the dialogue. Hopefully the folks, listening learned something out of this. And the whole idea is to, entice you to be more security cautious and say, okay, security should be top of mind. Take a look at security. And the challenge is it's an ever evolving thing. So don't think, okay, I've learned this, I've done with it. Cloud is evolving, security is evolving. So keep at it. And always, Chris, thank you so much for being my co-host, partner in crime. Always a pleasure.
Yes. The virtual high five across the pond. And thank you. You've done a fantastic job. I agree. Hopefully, folks take one thing, take three things, take five things away from this. Again, don't rush into it in your environments. I would say the conversation is key. Let's be honest. Most of these configurations, we're IT folks, we can do this stuff, in our sleep. It's 5-10 minutes. The conversations are key. You got to have those with your businesses, your stakeholders. That's where the real nitty gritty stuff is happening. Those governance plans comes out of those conversations. So hard work, but somebody's got to do it, and we're here to help you. So hope you enjoy, and everybody have a great day. All right.
Thanks, everybody.